Joining us now on the Knicks Film School podcast. This is exciting. It is always a thrill to get a chance to talk to someone who I have followed, and I know Jeremy has followed for a very long time. He is the standard bearer in the industry when it comes to looking at teams from a slightly more analytical perspective. Not that we don't love what some of his colleagues get up and yell about on, get up first take and all those sorts of things. But sorry, Bobby, I was going to bring on Kendrick Perkins to talk about some cat mechanics. I think he's busy today. So ESPN's Bobby Marks. How you doing?
I'm good. You know, if you brought Perk on, what he would probably say is he goes, just ask Bobby. Because when Perk, and I find it's funny, and I love Perk when he's on TV and he's, throwing out like, hey, they should trade Jimmy Butler or someone, and then they'd be like, well, who do you want to trade him for? And he'd be like, oh, just ask Bobby. He can figure that out for you and stuff like that. But no, I'm thrilled to be on with you guys. I teased this morning. I said, yeah, perfect. Good timing, right? Good timing. If you're a New York Knicks fan out there, as far as how well this team has played, and it feels like the Eastern Conference has certainly opened up a little bit, right? It's not a one-team race or two-team race that maybe we all thought about it when you look at Milwaukee's struggles and the new coach and the Embiid injury and in Philadelphia, and
sure.
There's a lot in Boston, losing. I mean, certainly the Laker loss, I think should open up some eyes a little bit.
Maybe
mental toughness, right? So we'll see, but yeah, it's as you guys know, it's good to be a New York Knicks fan.
So that's kind of where I want to start, because we're fans. We the phrase of the last few days has been kind of jumping out the window. We're a lot of us are more measured than others, and there's been a lot of bad years. So when you give yourself over emotionally to a team, sometimes it could take a lot. And I'm just curious to start out just generally from a front office perspective. So you're, let's put you in Leon Rose's seat for a minute, and you're watching this, and there's clearly something brewing here. How much do you look at what's going on, and I almost want to say, like, treat it as evidence? I mean, it's all evidence, right? But in terms of, we have a trade deadline now that we're, it's 6 days from today. And you obviously have a responsibility to be responsible, and not get caught up at the moment. But at the same time, there's something going on here. You're going to Jalen Brunson doing what he's doing. From a front office perspective, how do you balance all of this at once?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly that part of you, that fan. When you work in a front office, you're also a fan, right? Like, you're rooting for what's on the court. There's part of you certainly like, okay, like, let's go all in than we were willing to do. What does that mean? I joked about it the other night. I said, like, when everyone in Lakerland wants to trade, I said, well, it takes a dance partner to go out there and dance, right? Like, you have to, like, I think people forget that, like, if you're going to make a trade, it takes somebody else to cooperate with you here. And so what does that mean? What is, there's no disgruntled all-star out there right now, right? And I don't think New York needs to go out and get them. Like, a year ago, I remember being in Publix and Kyrie Irving asked to be traded. Right. We're the Friday before the trade deadline. And there's nobody really out there. But on the other end, I think if you're Leon in the front office, I think you have to look at it where you had, you've got the Julius injury with, he's out a couple weeks here, probably through the All-Star break. Yeah, at least. And you had a lot of guys play heavy minutes last night and against Indiana. Right. They treated it like a playoff game. Right, you basically had like a six man rotation, I guess, with Deuce as a guy coming off the bench, and everyone played 35 plus minutes, and you shot 8 for 28 or 8 for 30 from 3. Okay, so you squeezed. I didn't realize Dante was like 8 for 26, I think, and then because he made so many big shots at the end, right? Like
the shots he made, there was a mid ranger that was massive in the moment. Yeah.
So there is the obligation there, like, okay, can we not touch our core guys, but maybe look for a back end of, and maybe we need another big, or maybe we need another shooter off the bench here. And how do we go about doing that where we're not touching any of our ones, or if we do, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's the Washington or Detroit one that's protected long, out. And, you've got that Fournier contract that's sitting there where you really don't have to do anything. Like, I think there's a kind of a misconception where it's like, once you get past the trade deadline and Fournier is on your roster, like, oh my God, like we're screwed now, because you could always exercise it in the offseason and then look to move him. That's kind of the, where I would see that going, because I think you would trend more towards that because it's a tradable contract here. But I do think for right now, I think there is an obligation to continually look for, some trimming around the edges type deals where nobody likes to overhaul their roster when you're good, right? Sure, yeah. Because you guys know this, there is this locker room dynamic too. Like, these guys like each other. Like, there is a genuine, and I remember, and I always use this example. I remember when Evan Turner was traded. Danny Granger got traded from Indiana to Philly for Evan Turner. And I think that was the year New York might have played them in the second round. Maybe, I think it might have been that 2012 or 2013
the 12-13 season.
Yeah. And I remember things were going great in Indiana, all of a sudden, and I'm not saying Evan Turner was a bad, it just the dynamics there, right? And I think Granger might have even been hurt, but the dynamics of the locker room kind of, shifted a little bit here. And I think, New York has something great going on right now. I mean, since the OG trade, they've been the best team in the NBA here. And I do think there's an obligation from the front office that, yes, we have to continually look for kind of marginal type deals where maybe we get a stretch four, to kind of help, or maybe we get an insurance, maybe we get a veteran point guard as an insurance policy just in case there.
You brought up the Fournier contract. I have a feeling Jeremy's going to ask about that. I just want a quick follow up on that. Because you mentioned locker room dynamics, and you mentioned since the trade, again, something's clicking, whatever it is. How much as a front office executive during this time of year do you really, not that you, I'm sure you always do this, but even especially when you have something like this going on, rely on your pro personnel scouts to be like, okay, how is this guy going to fit? Like, how does that become almost more important as when you're making a trade in season? Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like you're, and I always think that pro personnel, and this is nothing against college scouts. And it's funny, we make such an emphasis during the draft, and it's for 2 picks, right? Maybe, and it's guys who are making $3 or $4 million. And the pro personnel department, I think, is more important than the college scouting department. I really do, because I think that's kind of where you can add, whether it be, as I said, kind of a rotational player, or maybe you have to get a starter. But here's where it comes in important. And this is where, not just the Knicks, but everyone, they're out there before the game. You guys see them 2 hours sitting, watching warm up, shoot around. And it's less about, we could all figure out who can play and who can't play, but it's more about personality. It's more about the personality, the background of that player, what kind of teammate he is, as far as how he would fit in with this group. And I think the beauty with Leon is, and when he got hired, right before the pandemic, I think in 2020, right? February 20, I think Leon got hired, right?
Yeah, officially March, but yeah.
And the big thing was, he's a, this big time CA agent. He's going to bring all those guys, right? He's going to bring the stars to New York. Yeah. What he's done is he's brought, Jalen and Josh, and, Randle at the time was a CA client, because he knew the guys. He knew their personality. He knew the dynamic. He knew going out and signing DiVincenzo this offseason, because there was already a relationship with Brunson and Hart, right? Like the Villanova guys here. He knew going out and we don't talk about Ryan at all, as far as, Ryan doesn't play at all. But don't overlook the importance as the 13th and 14th player on that roster here. So I think that's the dynamic, as far as if you're a pro personnel scout, it's less about we know that player can help us, but as far as the dynamic, as far as what the locker room is and what type of personality that player has.
It's a great point. And I think that's something a lot of fans often overlook when they try to be GMs, which I don't blame them for, is we've all worked with someone who we're not fans of. And so
you're talking about me. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to say your name, but everyone knows.
It's fine.
The just having that person in your building who maybe you don't want to interact with on a daily basis, and how that impacts the chemistry and as things are flowing. And with that said, as the Knicks kind of go along, when they're looking to add someone, how they incorporate that player is kind of twofold. Number one, how do you balance that? And number two, I look at this Knicks team that has actually been red hot since the OG Anunoby and Precious Achiuwa trade.
Yeah.
Listen, I remember when the Anunoby trade happened, and I said when I did our YouTube video that we do after each trade, I said, like, listen, you watch. I thought Achiuwa had been better in Pirtle in Toronto, and people were like, oh my god, like, and I'm like, no, listen, his minutes went down last year after the Pirtle trade. Achiuwa's minutes here, where it became, significantly down. And I thought he filled a role, right? Like, he's not going to go out and give you 20. I I don't think you want him shooting 16 attempts a night, right? Like last night was a little, basically it's kind of like all hands on deck as far as what you basically had, like, 7 or 8 guys that you can play here and stuff like that. So, you could say the Achiuwa, the two trades, right? The Anunoby trade and the Achiuwa trade there.
And it is. It is 2 trades since they broke it up, right? Into a quote unquote. But in terms of the Knicks and how they've been operating, they're 19th in efficiency since getting OG Anunoby. Is that something that the Knicks should be prioritizing as they look through the trade market? And if so, what type? I know you mentioned it at the 4, but is it more of a lead ball handler, especially with Deuce emerging, even if he's playing more off ball?
I think there's a difference between playoff depth and regular season depth. And right now, New York is at playoff depth right now because of the injuries, right? That's what I said before. Like, the minutes are eventually going to catch up here. Eventually, you're going to catch, the grind. Eventually, one of I don't know if it will be the Laker game or one of these games is like, one of these guys might not have it, right? So it's going to be who's the next man up here. That would be kind of the one thing as far as, I think Deuce has been good. And listen, you want to roll him out there in the playoffs, and, you guys know playoff basketball, you're basically playing 7 guys. You're basically, unless something drastically happens here as far as an injury, you're playing 7 guys, and it's like 38
too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. What you saw last night against Indiana is playoff basketball. Like, that's the minutes, and stuff low. So I think you have to be careful going out and getting a veteran, and then all of a sudden, I saw this I'm dating you guys. We went out and got Hubert Davis. This is a former Knick Hubert Davis. This is 03-04, right?
Great shooter.
Yeah,
good shooter.
Great shooter. Hubert was kind of a little bit past his time then. We went out and got him in a trade, and we really didn't have a role for him, right? And it kind of soured on him as far as, so I think you have to be careful going out and getting guys who are coming in averaging 25 minutes, and then all of a sudden there's no role for them, or it's going to be a guy that, spot minutes there. But I do think, you have to kind of walk that balancing act, because I do think, maybe you can get another shooter, right? Can you get another, guy? I always thought, like, Alec Burks would have been perfect, right? Like, just kind of like, how do you, are you willing to do the Fournier contract for Burks, who's going to be an expiring contract, and it's basically a 4-month rental potentially here. I threw out Olynyk, in Utah, and I know just as a stretch big, a guy that can kind of stretch the floor and kind of insurance there, but you might not see Kelly Olynyk in a playoff series. That's the reality here. So that's where you have to be. You'd love, like, as I said, like, playoff, a regular season depth is basically 12 guys, 10, 12 guys that you can play, and barring an injury, you can kind of shuttle in here. But as I said, playoff depth is, you're playing 7 or 8 guys, and you do have to be careful there.
I'm happy you brought up Olynyk, because that was when the Mitch injury happened. Immediately, everybody's attention turned to, they need to bring in a center. And then Isaiah Hartenstein stepped into the lineup. And if you believe certain advanced metrics, you could say he's been like literally the best defensive center in the sport. I know that some of those maybe go overboard. He's been awesome. And then he injures his Achilles, misses 2 games. And if you remember back to last season, first 30, 40 games of the year, he did not look like what he's looked like ever since, because he was dealing with an Achilles. And you have now Precious emerging, and like Sims, again, you use the term rotation big. I think he's a rotation big. And then you have Mitch, who's supposed to be coming back, and we'll see how that goes. You got Hartenstein's also his unrestricted free agency coming up.
Yeah,
I'm curious. This is more of a big picture question than necessarily a trade deadline question, but when you have a singular position that there's more balls in the air than you probably would like to if you had your druthers as a front office person, do you just kind of like, well, I guess we got to roll with it and figure it out as it goes along? Like how do you, or do you try to get a grasp on everything and you have like all the, the whiteboard beam with all the different arrows pointing out like if this, then that, like how do you deal with that?
Well, because there's a financial component too, right?
Of course,
that's, I mean, we all love talking about what's on the court and X's and O's, but there's like that financial component to building, and that's the beauty of the NBA. It's kind of different than other sports, and the rules are complicated here. So here's how I look at it. OG's contract's probably going to double, right? 35, 36, somewhere probably. Maybe we get this Sam Rose discount here, right? So you have Hartenstein, who's got early bird rights.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're looking at, is it 13 million, somewhere around there? 13. I think that's the number for early bird. So that's the most New York can pay him. I don't think it's hard for me to, centers these days I don't know. Maybe some team comes in with a crazy number. So
I wanted to ask you about that. Do you do you think there's actually a team that has cap space?
You know what?
I've looked at the market and
I had a team ask me about a player on their roster that is in the same situation, different position here. And we basically kind of went through the process of elimination here, right? Like who need, like you could say there's 8 teams with cap space, but that don't matter. Like, right. But are you going to go out and pay a center $17, $18 million per year? Like maybe is Detroit doesn't need it. Is Charlotte going to do like these, is that a priority? Like point guards are priorities here, right? Like as far as when you look at the average salary per position, centers is on the bottom here. Like it's just the reality of the situation here. So you throw in let's say $13 million for him, and then all of a sudden the numbers start to, they start to creep up here and everything. So I think if you're New York, like I would be, if I'm going to, say, I'm not sure when Mitch comes back. Isaiah's been through a couple injuries here. We got Taj on a 10-day. Precious has been good for us. As you said, Jericho, like maybe there's an insurance guy as far as like on an expiring here, or maybe it's, I don't know, is it Taj that you just signed for the rest of the season just for, what can he do for you? But I would be hesitant going out and getting a center that's got life on his contract past this year.
I also think you're onto something with the Sam Rose discount. I don't know. They still.
And I love Sam Rose, so I'm just kidding. I'm kidding here. I don't want the phone call.
We love Sam Rose. We're big fans of Sam Rose.
That was a great contract that he got for Jalen Brunson. Arguably underpaid.
Well, and it's a great. The only thing, listen, real quick on Jalen. The only thing I get concerned about on Jalen, and you look at how New York has structured some of their deals and stuff. The only thing I can get concerned on it is that it descends, and it's great for New York, right? I love descending contracts. Sign me up for those. Like, is the extension?
Yeah.
And I get that from when agents call me a lot and they say like, hey, what do you think of my guy? And I say, yeah. And I'm like, but be careful on the last year. Right. Like Wendell Carter Jr. is a great example.
That's a good one. Wendell
Carter Jr. contract is terrific, but the last year of the deal is $10 million. Even with the new CBA rules, 140% off 10 million it becomes a challenging here. So when you look at it for Jalen, I think I tweeted it out. I think it was like
156.
Yeah, 156. I think
he ain't signing that. He ain't signing that.
I mean, it's 34, 35 per year. So and listen, there's a relationship and he loves it there and all. And so I wouldn't say I wouldn't be like, it's not like Donovan Mitchell this upcoming offseason. If Donovan Mitchell doesn't sign an extension in Cleveland, then if I'm in Cleveland, I'm like, oh man, like we can offer him. This is the most, right? This is the most under the CBA, 4 for 200, right? Like this is where it is. Where with Jalen, it's like, if it doesn't sign an extension, it's not a red flag, right? It's a business decision. It's a business decision that I can play out the 24-25 season, become a free agent if I decline my player option in 25. And then sign for, 30% of the salary cap here. It's the same with, Brooklyn's going to go through this and it's a little bit different. They're going to go with Mikal Bridges. Bridges And you go from one extreme to the other. Like his rookie extension in Phoenix was great, 4 for 90 and stuff. But what happens is that when in your last year, you're making 23 million and you go 140% off that, it's not as much as you probably think. And that's where, just going on a little tangent here, that's where I thought the one thing the league and the PA should have done a little bit better was the extension rules and make it allowable that you can extend for the percentage of the cap, right? If you have 7 years of service going into that year where you're extension eligible, then you should be able to extend for 30% of the cap. Or if you've got 10 plus years, it should be up to 35%. And I like the 140% rule, and it helps a lot of people out. But what you're going to see with Brunson and probably Mikal is that these guys probably playing out their contract here.
So now we're talking more in terms of the finances. You're Leon Rose.
Yeah.
Does this season impact your decision to go into the tax or to stay below it? Because a lot of fans bring attention to moves that would vault the Knicks into the tax. And as I've said to them, the Knicks could do that. It's James Dolan's money, but there's the repeater tax. You don't have to care about James Dolan's money, but the Knicks very well might. So with that being said, where do you stand on the matter?
I don't think the luxury tax moving forward is as dangerous as it used to be. And I say that because starting in 25, 26, the bracket. So we go the luxury tax bracket. So you go 0 to 5, 5 to 10, based on where you are, right? So if you're paying if you're $3 million over, you're paying like $1.50 for every dollar over, right? The brackets get lowered now. So basically, what the league is saying, like, we're not going to penalize you as much if you're $3 million over. It's going to be dollar for dollar. Right. So it's not as dangerous as the apron stuff. The apron stuff is dangerous here because it limits you from roster building here. Like I said this on TV the other day, I said, like, it used to be, and this is when Miami did the Rozier trade. It used to be that Pat Riley would go into Mickey Harrison's office and say, hey, it's going to cost us an additional $30 million towards the tax. Now what's happening is that Mickey Harrison say, well, what does it do to the first apron? What does it do to the second apron? Are we going to have cash available to go out and send? Is our 2032 first going to be frozen? Can we aggregate contracts and stuff like that? And I think when your teams that where New York is, and they're in a terrific spot, that's what you have more concern about, is that these apron rules. So the apron is $7 million over the luxury tax for the first. It's $17 million over the luxury tax for the second. So next year, or this upcoming 24-25, it's $190 million. Like, there's no danger of getting there. But as you guys see where Phoenix is, right? You don't want, you don't want to be where Phoenix is. And I said, hey, if you're going to go all in, go all in. Right. But what happens is Phoenix is a terrific 30-game team during the regular season. Like, if there was a 30-game schedule, I'd be like, sign that team up for going 25-5. Right. Yeah. But when you have 9 guys on the minimum salaries and you don't have any first round picks at your control, it makes it extremely hard to build out your back end of your roster. Right? Like, Boston's going to go through it with Derek White eventually. He's going to become a free agent, and you got to figure out if you're going to have to pay him. And there's a lot of teams like that here. So I think for New York, I wouldn't be as concerned about the luxury tax, especially that the tax is going to be coming down. The distribution amount is going to be coming down. Like, we're not going to see Golden State paying $186 million towards the tax anymore next year. Like that, like, teams are starting to realize that. So the money you get back is not going to be great. And you got to get into the repeater, man. You got to be there 4 years like that. You got to make it. You got to make a commitment. You got to make a commitment to spend here. So I wouldn't worry about tax. I would, long, big picture, look out for that, that apron, the first and second apron there.
So with that being said, if the Knicks were to bring someone in, think of when healthy, right? And realistically, as opposed to Mitchell Robinson, if they get Julius Randle back over the next few weeks, you're looking at the same starting 5. You've got this new addition, Deuce McBride, who can't be traded, Quentin Grimes, Precious Achiuwa, and Josh Hart. Yeah. So that's 10 players with this new person. I don't particularly want to move or want to see Quentin Grimes be moved mid-season. I'd rather push it towards the end of the season. I don't think there's a long-term future with his next salary and the money that the Knicks have. But if you're to consider the new player, number one, how do you think, is that too much to impact Quentin Grimes, where if you bring someone in, you almost have to find a solution moving him? And number two, where would you rank Grimes in terms of as an asset of Grimes and the 4 protected picks that the Knicks own and their own 2024 first this year?
Man, I got to write this question down.
Sorry, I know.
No, I'm kidding. I got it. So I think you hit a great point as far as like big picture. When you get Randle back and Mitch, like all right. So now you go out and get a guy, right? How's he going to play? Yeah. Where's he playing? That's the beauty of like making trades in season is hard, because then like the only positive with the trade deadline and how they've changed it is that the deadline now is before All-Star break. It used to be after, right? It used to be off there. So at least you have a window, like a 10-day window there to incorporate that player with a couple of games, and then you have the break there. That's where, that's the hard part, is like, where's that player going to play? Right. And even if you, let's say, because Fournier is not part of your rotation here. So even if you moved Evan out, and let's just say you went out and got Malcolm Brogdon, I'm just throwing it out there, and gives you another ball handler here. Insurance policy, veteran insurance policy for players. Like, what's he going to play 10, 12 minutes? Right. Is he going to be maybe a replacement for Brunson when you need to maybe like rest him? Does Jalen want to rest? I don't know. Like, is it more of like, it's almost like what you probably want, and I'll use a baseball terminology, you want a middle reliever. You want a guy that can come in and in 6th and 7th inning, right? For a guy to come in, and if you're a lefty specialist, to come in and kind of, you need one out in the 7th. And those guys are hard to get at the trade deadline. So that's kind of where, like, you want that 11th and 12th guy to kind of be that person here. As far as what you have, as far as the draft assets, listen, Grimes is going into an extension year. But he's not I don't look at it as an expiring contract, because he's going to be he could be a restricted free agent here. So the team, if you want to go out and acquire him, you have protection as far as what you losing him in free agency. It's not a clear cut. I mean, I think you saw it with Emmanuel, like, and they're different players, but there was value there because Toronto knew they can re-sign him and had the ability to re-sign him this coming off season here. As far as your picks, listen, who knows what happens with the Wizards in Detroit first. Like I call them like 50 cents on a dollar first. Right. Like, I don't know. I mean, who knows where these rosters are going to be? Maybe, 3 years from now or 2 years from now. And it could be maybe a lottery pick, that Wizards pick. I think the protection keeps on coming down. Detroit, I mean, I would say you might want to rely on that turning into a couple seconds because of how the language is in there. Milwaukee in 25, I think it's, top 4 protected? Yeah.
Pelicans get it if it's 4.
Yeah. Listen, who knows? Who knows, man? Like, who knows? This team could lose in the first round. I don't think so. And then like shit explodes, like, and then all of a sudden it's like, like the 14th pick in the draft. Like, I don't know. And then the Dallas one, I would think it's going to be conveyed this year. I mean, it should have been conveyed last year. So you're looking at probably late teens in an average to below average draft, but that's okay. You can find value. I mean, Miami found value with Jaime. Golden State found value with Brandon Podziemski, right? Guys who have been in college 4 years here. And then all your own, and then you got swaps and stuff like that here. So I think certainly your own first are valuable because you can protect them. You can leave them unprotected here, almost like what Cleveland did, what Minnesota did. But then as far as the pecking order, I would probably put the Milwaukee first, the Dallas first, and then the two that, and then you got a ton of seconds too. I think you got like 11 seconds to play around with if you wanted to do something there too.
Bob, you've been incredibly generous with your time. A couple more and then we'll get you out of here. I have to ask one thing, because again, I might have a chance to talk to you before the summertime.
Should I take a sip of my coffee first when you ask her, or are you gonna?
Yeah. Maybe. So you tweeted, and we just referenced it. You tweeted Jalen Brunson is going to be able to sign an extension this summer. He's not the only Knick All-Star that is going to be able to sign an extension this summer. And look, we're big fans of Julius Randle here at Knicks Film School. I mean, You know the history, man.
I do.
Not too many players come through here and make 3 All-Star teams, let alone 2 All-NBA teams. He's been a horse despite this recent injury. You also, though, do have a term which I think, I don't know, is it you or Brian invented the Max? Who came up with that?
I have my own language for those Max, and Wendy has the fun Max, and then the guys for like the 10 years, I have the O blank Max. So we were texting about it, and I want to so we both have we're in the same mindset as far as what they are, right?
I do want to be very clear about this. I'm not suggesting that Julius Randle at any amount of money is going to turn into a bad contract, but you have a player who, where he slots in on the league hierarchy. Like we kind of know what Julius is. We know what he is in. You are now entering a summer where I would assume those sorts of conversations would happen. And again, it's like the vibes are great here. A lot of good stuff going on. There's also a lot of balls in the air. Are you at this point, if you're Leon Rose already, kind of, how are you handling it? How are you thinking ahead about that?
Yeah, and with different representation too, right? Julius with Bill Duffy now at WME here. I think, and listen, I give Julius a lot of credit, man, because he I think he know, like he was and you guys know he was god awful in the beginning. Like we were, and we get stats from our analytics guys, and the numbers were, we're just like, holy God! And could this guy turn, especially? How it ended, like, the playoffs have not been kind to Julius Randle, right? Like, and you guys know that. So yes, I would say that as far as an extension, that would be something I would consider. I want to see him in the playoffs.
Okay.
I want another body of work in the playoffs here. I know what he can do in the regular season. Okay. Yep. I know what he can do in the regular season. I would be careful. Yeah. The max at, at $45 million, I would be careful with that. I would be extremely, extremely careful because those contracts tend to not age well. And then you get to a point and you're like, oh, we got to attach something to get rid of it. I think you see it with with Jeremy, and Jeremy Grant's at a 5 for 160. And I'm not saying that's where Julius is. Julius might be more, but Jeremy's increases over the year. Kuzma comes down. So I think if anything, that if you're in New York, you would want to do something flat, or you would want to decrease it there. But for me to say that, do I think Julius Randle's a $50 million player? I don't. I don't. I mean, that's nothing to it. It's just like what the CBA is going to force teams to do is a big jigsaw puzzle, right? It's your 2 main guys, right? And him and Brunson could be your 2 main guys. But what happens now? You have 3 main guys with OG. So now you're going to have Brunson making, I'm just throwing this out there, $40 million. This is down the road here. And let's say in 2025, you're going to have OG making $38 million. And then you're going to have Randle making $40 million. Like it catches up. Like and what we saw everyone thought the cap was going to take this big jump this next year. Like everyone was, and when you guys see the numbers when they come out, and I kept on saying like it's not, like it's only gonna go up like 4%, and it's going up 3.7%. And it's, the cap's not going, we're not going to see 2016 again here, where it takes the money, even with the new TV money coming in, because it's capped at 10% here. So I think you just have to be careful as far as, and yeah, I mean, I think if he continues to play well and he gets back healthy and he has a terrific playoff series, definitely, I think there's extension talks here. But for me I mean, I'm not paying for 240, I mean, that's a huge, huge number.
So I'll take us home with the 2-parter. The first is Knicks fans obviously have a wandering eye about stars. It's natural.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they? Outside of Philadelphia, are there any teams that Knicks fans should just be mindful of as they approach the deadline?
Well,
and the second one is, what is your favorite trade deadline story from when you were an executive?
Oh my God. Geez, let's do the first one first. Outside of Philadelphia, it's interesting because, I'm sure we'll wait and see what the Embiid when we heard on Thursday, but what the final outcome will be here, and as far as how aggressive does Philadelphia become now, as far as what they do with they've got a bunch of 3 first round picks, and they've got 12 expiring contracts, and they've got cap flexibility here, and when does Embiid come back? I always thought you kind of just getting like short-term fits, like guys like Miles Bridges, guys like who are kind of like expiring. I mean, that's a different subject there where you have to basically embrace, there's a lot that comes with that, right? Like that's just not getting a 20-point player. Like, so, you have to look at like Bruce Brown was another guy, as far as guys, Bruce Brown's a great name because he's got a team option next year. You have nothing to, financial obligation here. So Philly is interesting because they have all the assets to go out and do a deal. I mean, we'll continually hear about the Lakers. I mean, we'll hear about them forever, forever and ever. And the reality is that, and I wrote about it, they've got one first round pick, okay, in 2029. And outside of AD and LeBron and Austin Reeves, what player on that roster has a positive net value in a trade without attaching a draft pick to improve the roster? It's Russell, Hachimura, nice players, but like you're not getting DeJounte Murray for that, or if that's what you want to do here. I said, back in December, and we were all wrong. I said, like, listen, keep an eye on what happens in Cleveland. They were 13-12 at the time, and Garland and Mobley were out, and they were not good, and they've been terrific. Like, Donovan's played great. And that's the big question is like, Donovan's better at point guard. Donovan's better with the ball in his hand. I saw it. This was like 6 years ago. I was in Cleveland, and this is when, and he was in Utah, and he was played. I think Rubio was out and he played point guard. I was like, he's better with the ball in his hand here. So I think it's, I don't think, certainly there is not, he's not going to be, looking to be moved and stuff like that here. So it's the trade deadline. It's interesting because it all takes is one player to be disgruntled. We haven't really gotten that, and we've seen a bunch of the trades happen already here. I think what's going to happen is, with the new rules that are coming on with these second apron rules, basically once the offseason starts, for some, it's April 15th, a third of the league, it's like a government shutdown. Like this is what's going to happen. Like, and I feel like I'm the weatherman saying like, there's a storm coming. It ain't coming for 3 months, but it's coming, man. And I can predict it's going to be 20 inches of snow. Like, you look at, you can't aggregate contracts in a trade. You can't send out cash. You can't, all your trade exceptions basically become frozen. So you better like what you have. And does that make teams does that make Minnesota all of a sudden now think, I need to go out and get Tyus Jones because this is the last time I can go out and get him because I can't combine salaries starting in the offseason here. So those are the things I would keep an eye on, those high spending teams. And we already saw it with when Milwaukee went out and got Lillard. That wouldn't have been allowed under these new rules this offseason. Holiday in Boston, Harden in the Clippers here. So yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't want to say it's going to be slow, but I think there might be more financial driven trades than we probably have seen in the past.
Great stuff. Trade deadline story.
Sorry.
We kept you over already.
Trade deadline story. What's my favorite? I mean, I had two. Listen, the years in Brooklyn were such a blur to me because it was such a. I mean, I don't know if I could say this on this. It was such a shit show because it's like 3 years. Like I don't even like you'll wake up one morning like, oh my god, did that happen in 2014? And I always tell this. I always tell this story. It's not a trade deadline story. Okay. Is that, and this is a reason why, I always chuckle when we give grades in the off season and stuff like that, because I always say it looks good in paper. And then all of a sudden you start playing. And after we did all those deals in 2013 and we did the Boston trade and signed Karolinko and got Sean Livingston. And we were like, man, we got a pretty good team. Our depth, right? Our depth is really good. We go to Duke for training camp. And I had towards the tail end of my career within New Jersey, I sold my house and was renting, which was pretty smart. And I was like a player, right? Like eventually something's going to happen here. So might as well start renting. And we go down to Duke and we scrimmage first night and the reserves kicked the living crap out of Garnett, Pierce, Brooke, Joe Johnson, and Darren Williams. Literally 54, 30. Oof. And I call my wife driving home and I said, we are getting fired. Like, oh my God. This is not going to end well. Right. So that's not a trade deadline story, but that's always my funny story because I can laugh about it now. I was not laughing then, but the two funny stories for me were Garnett, when we traded Garnett to Minnesota.
That's right.
For Thaddeus Young in 2015. And Garnett's no trade clause carried with him, right? When he got traded from Boston, he had a no trade clause. One of the few that didn't. He had to waive it. And it continues like Beal and Phoenix. Like he still has a no trade clause. So he gets traded and we get a deal. We're going to trade him for Minnesota. He's going to go home to Minnesota. We're going to get Thaddeus Young, blah, blah. And it's like 10-3. And Garnett has not sent in his paperwork. He had to do an amendment to waive his no trade. And then all of a sudden at like 2:58, here it comes. And he faxed it. You know, who uses a fax machine? You hear that, remember that noise you used to hear when an incoming fax would be coming in? So he faxed it and we got the deal done and got that. And then the other thing real quick was this was during 13-14. And we were spending so much money. I mean, our payroll was like 100 million, which back then was a lot. And our luxury tax bill was 90, which was extremely a lot, right? We had like $190 million in payroll. We go out and we have a deal on the table to get Jordan Hill, the member forward from the Lakers, and
Nick too.
Yeah, and we had a trade exception. We were going to acquire him. And it was going to cost like an additional like $50 million, like for 3 months, right? And we were like, I said to Bill, I don't feel good about this one, man. Like, I do not feel good about, it's not my money. I do not feel good about this. And Prokhorov was like, if it helps, it helps, do it. And I was just like, I don't think so. We got to call the coach. So we called Jason Kidd and we said, are you going to play this guy? And this goes back to like what we were talking about with Tibbs. And it's different. Yeah. It's like the fight, like, and this is where Tibbs will come into are you going to play this guy? And Jason was like, I don't think so. I'm not playing. I don't think we can find it. And we were like, no, we're not doing it. We can't do it. I can't live with myself spending $50 million for a 3-month rental here. So I mean, I can go on and on, but those are the two ones I think of, whenever we hit the trade deadline.
Those are
incredible. We could talk about Dwight in 2011, and we thought we had him in a trade and we didn't have him in a trade. And I heard on the radio, this is before like social media exploded, that Dwight Howard had opted in. Like there's so many different things. We don't have enough time, but so many different things.
Bobby, we could sit here and do an entirely different pod on just reliving the Melo.
Oh my God.
That's a
different animal. Different animal. Different animal. No, that took years. Took years off my life. Took all years off my marriage. I mean, but goodness.
You're incredible. We're two nerds, self-admitted nerds when it comes to cap stuff. So you're kind of our shining star. Speaking of shining stars, I didn't even get chance to ask you, what's going to happen first. The sun extinguishes itself, or the Nets and Knicks complete a trade with each other after you lit the internet.
I think it's going to snow in Southwest Florida. That's what's going to happen first.
There you go. Okay, you heard it here, folks. You've been incredibly, incredibly generous with your time. Typically, this is the part of the show where I ask people if they want to plug or promote anything. But I think Tim Bontemps and I have an article coming out on Monday about these new rules and how it's going to impact the trade deadline. I think it's a fun article to take a look at. We'll have the trade guide will be continually updated on ESPN.com. If you're interested in learning about salary cap, we're teaching classes in Vegas for Summer League with sportsbusinessclassroom.com. It's been a fun adventure as far as taking that on, as far as learning how the front office works and learning about the cap and all that stuff here. And then you can just follow me on Twitter and Instagram and everything like that. But we'll have videos out and content, over the next week and everything. You got to get one of those old Game of Thrones shirts that says "Winter is coming" before a third of the league goes into the deep freeze. Bobby Marks, you're the absolute best. Truly a privilege and honor to be able to pick your brain about this stuff. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.